Well, this is my first podcast without my elderly friend, Kevin Brittingham. But it is the Live, Cure, Die podcast. And who's here today? Who are you? You are Jack.
I'm Jack Potter. I own Guerrilla Tactical. Tight. Some of you might have heard of us.
Yeah, you guys make ammo, right?
Yeah, the ammo company.
Yeah.
No, holster manufacturing is our bread and butter. Medical gear, other gear, some training stuff, YouTube, a lot of media.
Easy.
All that good stuff.
Yeah, tight. And you guys are out of Washington. Where specifically in Washington?
Yeah, we're Southwest Washington out in the Gorge. We have some land out there that we bought in 2018, developed it ourselves. When we started the business, it was a cool place to take off from, and just built a warehouse, or bigger warehouse last year, and just rolling with it.
Tight. Yeah, so kind of the impetus with this one, I mean, we met a couple SHOT Shows ago. Obviously, we'll get into it, you're originally from out here, but Kevin's been in the industry for 30-something years now, and kind of the core group of guys and girls that he is as tight with are the Trey Knights, the Chris Barretts, all right. that. And that's that kind of that original generation, is at least for the current gun guys, that they're kind of the old heads, and not like in a disrespectful way. It's just like they're the original, the OGs. And I thought it would be cool. While Kevin's in Africa, he's there like 6 months out of the year. And I figured people want the podcast. And if we can't get Kevin, he and I know different demographics of people. And I thought it'd be cool to get the younger generation, the newer guys. I think we think a lot differently than a lot of the older generation of gun guys. And I just thought, let's get Kevin's side. Because people loved those episodes. Sure. Like the Chris Barrett one was 5 hours long.
Yeah.
And I just thought it would be cool to get younger guys, newer guys that are hungry, that are doing stuff. And obviously people know, there's going to be plenty of people that watch this that know who Guerrilla Tactical is. There might be some that don't. And I just think it's cool to showcase people that I've met or whatever. And we're just kind of on that same kind of wave within the gun industry. Because I think the way that we view the industry is a lot different than how the industry has been for the last 30 plus years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really cool kind of take on everything. And kind of, we'll get into my backstory, I'm sure, here in a little bit, but like how I kind of came into this world is different than a lot of people. And, we know kind of people more or less around my age range or our age range that have become successful in this kind of space. And it is such an industry that it's this huge industry, and we're just a small niche pocket, I feel. But it's big enough with enough innovation in that pocket that everybody eats. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, 100%. To kind of like get background, you grew up upstate New York. If you want to just kind of lay out how you got into guns, you can be as long-winded as you want, or you can make it as short as you want, whatever. But just a kind of a background for the people who don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't know your background.
Yeah. So I grew up in upstate New York. I don't have a story of like, we're, big gun people or whatever. Right. I didn't come from like an anti-gun family or anything. We just lived in rural upstate New York. We had 14 acres up there that we, ran a business out of, seasonal business that my parents had started in the mid 80s. And that we had kind of built up, and I was a big part of that throughout the 90s growing up. Just, living on those 14 acres and then having adjacent forests. We were out and about, playing Army all the time like kids do. I spent a bunch of years playing a really high level of competitive paintball. A lot of people don't know that about me. I played semi-pro paintball for most of my teen years, up until I was about 19.
You and Greg Hastings?
Yeah.
That's my dog, Greg Hastings.
Spent a lot of time playing that video game too.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, I did that. And so, I played MLG for Call of Duty as well.
Tight.
When I was a teenager. So I have this bad habit, and I think that, I have X's on my hands. I'm straight edge. A lot of people know that. A lot of people don't know what it is. Look it up. There's a lot of information out there. But I think a lot of us who came from that scene have just like, we get passionate about something, then just go all in.
All the way, yeah.
And that's probably why it's good that I don't drink or do drugs, because I'd probably be dead in a ditch somewhere or something, because I don't have like
you want to be the
happy
best
medians. I just want to be
be
the best at everything.
The best cocaine.
So that was me, doing paintball and doing whatever I did as a kid, getting into video games, all that. Yeah,
that's crazy. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, so it's we grew up. Had my grandpa gave my dad a 22 and he gave me a 22 that, passed that down kind of thing. I still have it in my safe. But that's kind of how that started, and, shooting gophers on the farm and, getting paid with like high powered pellet guns as a kid to, go clear the local barns of, hay barns of pigeons and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got my start in firearms or whatever, and just kind of grew from there. And then I lived when I was about 18 years old, I was kind of getting a little hungry for change. It was, I knew it was a big world out there, and growing up in like rural upstate New York, had its limitations.
Town,
yeah. It was definitely a great upbringing. My sister and I were homeschooled. My parents we always had food on the table. We always had a roof over our heads. We didn't have an awful lot of money. So we were creative in how we did things. Always had a strong DIY ethic. And then they would really dive into our passions. So anything that we were passionate about, my parents were, we were privileged enough in that regard. We didn't have a lot of money, but they would say like, hey, what are you into? We'll take you there. We'll support this sport that you're into. I played ice hockey for many years, came from a big hockey family as well. I was kind of looking for something different. A lot of dudes I knew who would graduate high school or maybe go on to college, maybe not, working the same kind of dead end jobs. And, even though we had a unique experience in the sense that we did have like a family business that, we worked on the farm and whatnot. I was like, hey, I think there's a big world out there I'd like to see. And the first thing was, my kind of first detour was moving to Texas for a while.
Okay.
So I met a girl, kind of in the scene who was from Texas. Yep. And so I went down there and ultimately moved down there and spent 4 years.
Whereabouts in Texas?
I lived in Austin, Texas. I lived in the suburb of Dallas, Plano, Texas.
Yep.
Those were kind of and Denton a little bit as well.
And when you were down there, I know obviously you were going to shows, but were you working? What were you doing, like work wise?
So at that point, I just was kind of taking whatever I could do. And I moved down there. I'd done a piercing apprenticeship when I was 18 years old in New York. And then a shop I worked at in upstate New York, they were opening like a sister shop down in Austin, Texas on 6th Street. So when I first moved down there, it was kind of under the pretext that I would manage the shop for them. So
kind of like the hardcore path.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like
be a barber.
Yeah. I'm glad I broke that mold because none of those things seem at all interesting to me in this day and age. But, we went down there and, I was hanging in there in Texas. It wasn't great in a lot of ways. I like the state of Texas fine. I still I'm involved in a business that's based down there now, and I fly down there every 6 weeks for a little bit usually. And it's great. I'm glad we don't live there anymore. But I moved down there, and then that was when I got my first real taste of like guns in my face because Texas, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I started building ARs, started building first couple ARs myself and, getting really into shooting. And I worked with a couple guys at that time who were quite into shooting. We kind of got together a lot on the weekends and trained and shot. And that's kind of where my first like love for building rifles and, getting involved in things, came from. So, ultimately it didn't work out for the best in Texas. And I found myself, we had a nice apartment, 2 nice vehicles, we were being successful.
Right.
I actually ended up the tattoo shop that I was supposed to manage. The guy great guy, but got in over his head on things. And then his wife got pregnant with their first child and he freaked out. And ultimately I went back to visit my folks and got a call from him and said, hey, I'm not going to keep the shop open. So I flew back to Texas with absolutely no idea what I was going to do and not a lot of money in the bank. So when I got back down there, I was kind of like, well, what should I do? Do I want to stay here? I was still with that girl. And she had just graduated college and was, had a professional job. And I was like a tattooed dude who didn't have anything going on. Right. So I ended up working for Whole Foods for a while and, it was cool back then, like years ago. It was actually a really good job. And I quickly rose to the ranks of, grocery buyer for that region. Mm-hmm. So that was cool, but I wasn't content with that. Yeah. And I was about, I was probably 21 at this time or whatever, 22.
Okay.
And again, I had successfully moved from New York and I was in another state and being successful, but I was still feeling very empty inside.
Yeah, there's more out there.
There's more out there. I still had like a very adventurous spirit to go out and do other things. And yeah, I knew I wasn't really happy with that life. And I knew that if I did stay, it would turn into that, regular house, 2-car garage, marriage, maybe kids, whatever. And at that very moment in my life, I was like, yes, I'm not about it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I ended up, we went our separate ways, and I sold everything I owned, and I went back to New York for one summer, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I grew up in the hardcore music scene of Syracuse. I'm going to shows there a lot. And so I knew some people who had been involved in this thing called Sea Shepherd. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of where I take a step back, go back in history a little bit, and kind of tell my backstory of like where I didn't have a generic pathway into this industry. Right. And so Sea Shepherd, I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew like people were getting together and like going on these ships and going to these like insane parts of the world, and like, physically stopping whalers and everything. And like at that,
is this because they were on TV for a bit. This is pre that?
No, this would have been during that time.
Okay.
Whale Wars was a show that people probably know about. Yeah. It was on Animal Planet or whatever. Yeah. And so I'd seen that before, and I was like, I don't know, this seems like a really cool way. Cause I thought about when I was younger, I'd, like most kids do, I'd thought about, maybe I should join the military, or maybe I should do whatever.
Doing your part and doing something
bigger than myself. Yeah. I knew a few people who had been involved in this, and I was like, this seems pretty awesome that like I can go to a place far off and like work on ships. And at that point, like growing up in upstate New York, of course I had the ocean adjacent to me, but you have to travel for it. And more or less I was landlocked growing up. I didn't spend a lot of time on the ocean. So people often ask me like, did you already have a love for being on the water and working on boats or being on boats? And I was like, no, I just took a chance and got a one-way ticket to Australia. Yeah. As like a 21-year-old kid or whatever. This timeline's a little bit jumbled in my brain. It was a long time ago. I'm getting old. That's all right. But yeah, I flew down to Australia and joined the ships down there in Melbourne, Australia. Yeah. And they were gearing up. I spent about 7 months gearing up to go to Antarctica.
Damn.
And up until this point, they had, done a lot of anti-whaling stuff. And I think that most people in the world will agree that it's pretty dumb in this day and age to like hunt whales.
Yeah, dude.
You know what I mean? It's like not necessary at all, right? Yeah. So I was like, this seems like a good cause. And then we realized that there was, some stuff going on in the background that because of the way that the Japanese whaling fleets were, getting so set up, refitting their ships, and they were faster than ever, and they were bringing down armed personnel and all this stuff that it was like, and they had reduced the quotas greatly. So it was a lot harder to like locate, it went from like 1,250 whales a year to like 150 whales a year. So it was hard to find them with the ships and stuff that we had on hand. Yeah. So we were like, hey, what's the plan? Because we're still going to Antarctica, and they announced that there was Interpol wanted, fishing vessels that were they're flags of conveniences from, South America, and they have Spanish crew on them, and they have, more or less slave labor from like Filipino crews that they're bringing over and like keeping these people against their will. And they're going down and they're illegally going after Antarctic toothfish, which is Chilean sea bass in a fancy restaurant. It's the same. And they're a fish that lives, very deep, waters. They, take a long time to reach sexual maturity. So they were like raking the bottoms of the oceans for these fish, and it was really messing up with like spawning, their natural habitats and the spawning. Yeah. So we found out as the Interpol wanted vessels, but there's no policing force or anything that was patrolling those, desolate parts of the world. Right. So we had already, this organization had operated down there many times before. So they said, hey, let's make it our mission this year to find these vessels. And it's a hefty goal because you're, in
huge geographic
location. Around in some of the roughest, most extreme conditions in the world. And, places like, there's shared kind of ownership over some of these regions between like New Zealand and Australia. And basically what they would do is they would do one flyover per year and call it, hey, we patrolled and we didn't see anything. Right. So we knew that there's like this huge issue with no law enforcement down there to actually enforce these laws in these protected areas. So we said, okay, cool, we're going to set out to find it. And we ended up rolling up on the most notorious of these bandit six, they call them. We were in touch with Interpol, agents of Interpol and whatnot, and they were, giving us feedback. We were giving them updates. And then what we ended up catching them in the act and physically stopping them from doing their fishing practices. And then we ended up doing what is now known as the world record setting longest maritime hot pursuit of 110 days of following and physically shutting down these operations of this illegal fishing vessel.
So was that, did you chase them all around Antarctica, or did you chase them out of there into elsewhere?
All around Antarctica, up out of that whole region, up into the South Indian Ocean, around Cape Horn, and then up to the west coast of Africa, where ultimately after 110 days or so, they sunk their own ship to try to hide evidence because they knew they were in big trouble.
With everyone on it.
Everyone on it. They all abandoned ship. So they had about 40 crew. And they were out in their life rafts. And we ended up going off. It was off the coast of West Africa, Principe, Sao Tome area. And we sent our crews out and we rescued them on the high seas. And then we brought them in. We had been in touch with the local authorities there. We took them all onto, one of our ships, worked security detail overnight, make sure that it was all kosher. And then they sent out law enforcement the next day, and they picked all these guys up. And then they ended up actually, I think the captain, chief officer, the fishing master, and maybe the first and second engineer all received sentences of 3 or 4 years. And they did time in Principe and Sao Tome for those crimes on the high seas.
That's insane. And where were they from originally? Do you remember?
It was mostly, it was a Spanish crew for the most of them. I think South American for one. Yeah. I think like Argentinian, if I remember correctly. And then most of the crew, like I was saying before, was Filipino crew. And then we helped and assisted to get them back home because that's a huge problem.
So when I remember being younger and seeing that show, I think, or little clips of it.
It was around.
Yeah. So when you're in pursuit of a vessel, or not even necessarily this specific one, but whether it just be a whaling vessel, whatever, how do you interdict that? Because I just don't know. I've seen like the water cannons. Yep. I've seen physical ramming of the boats. Is anyone armed? Because that has to be a thing where it comes up like you're going to take rounds eventually. How does that all work? Because the way the show makes it, and maybe they cover some stuff or not cover stuff up, but they don't want everyone to know everything going on. But it seemed like a bunch of young kids that like were in it to win it. They have the right mentality and they're just about to get in over their heads. Like they're about to start fucking with the wrong people.
There was a lot of that for sure. In the beginning, especially when they started the show, because they were able to go do things that like untrained, unprofessional people should never have been able to do. But that's like the power of passion that you're able to really do a lot of stuff that, you physically cannot do. You just do it anyways. Yeah. I think it's Mark Twain who has an interesting quote that's like, they didn't know they couldn't do it, so they did it anyways. And that's, I felt that many times. Yeah. And kind of like my upbringing with having to do everything ourselves, building everything ourselves, fixing everything ourselves, very DIY minded, really came into play a lot of time in that organization because you are dealing with a little bit of money. You are dealing with, not a lot of resources, but you have to make something happen. So you make it, you just do it. And that's kind of the attitude that, carried that organization for a long time. They started in 1977. So it had been going on for quite some time. Yeah. And then right around the time that I had gotten into it, tactics started to change because we were working on a more, more professional scope. Okay. And immediately following this campaign, we were contacted by authorities in Interpol and said, hey, like, this was a tremendous job that you guys have done. And it's brought so much media attention and global attention to these issues happening in Africa that we think that you should make this your focus. So I kind of came into an interesting time because all of a sudden it went from like a ragtag, group of people just trying to make something happen to a shift where we changed tactics. We had better equipment. We had better funding. We had more training. We had all the above, and we went from, this ragtag group of people just doing our thing, which there's magic to that. Yeah. But it went from that to we're all trained professional crew that can execute a role or a job or a mission better than ever.
That's awesome.
And it was cool to see that growth and be a part of that, because I was there in the beginning when we spearheaded all of our capacity building missions that we carried on in West Africa with all these various countries. And they're still doing it to this day.
Yeah. Is it still an organization,
Yeah,
Shepherd?
yeah, still very busy. Still doing it with these issues around West Africa being the main focus.
Yeah.
And yeah, I of course have no involvement anymore. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, here pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, I spent multiple years doing some weird and wacky stuff all around the globe, like going to Antarctica. But then my primary focus was working in West Africa with countries like the Gambia and Sao Tome, Principe, Gabon, and a lot of time spent in Liberia.
Yeah.
Working both on land and at sea, doing capacity missions with these guys, kind of bringing their militaries, their navies and Marines up to speed on seamanship and boarding operations. I was a rib operator for a long time and taught these guys how to do force boardings and how to inspect and arrest vessels.
Awesome.
So we kind of shifted all of our focus into capacity building with these guys to try to make force multipliers so that they could, carry out the important work on their own coasts that again, they don't have a lot of resources for.
Yeah, it's cool that a kind of a private entity was able to do that, where you, like you said, you went from that kind of just group of people trying to make it happen to now you're not necessarily state sponsored, but you're getting true funding, getting true assets, and then you're able, because I mean doing what you were doing, you'd have to think on like a national level for a country to allocate funds to doing that. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's not a big enough thing. I would think to like a big, like even Australia or whatever, they have so many other things going on that it doesn't seem like that would be their number one focus. So for a private entity to be able to do that is huge.
And that's really the only way it works. And there's many organizations that, work throughout the world, but a lot in Africa with anti-poaching on land, working with the parks there, establishing parks. And we've done a little bit of that as well. But no one was doing it in the ocean. And that was a huge issue in West African countries, because big corporations will come down, big, ships operating out of, Spain and other parts of France. They'll come down with these massive purse-seining vessels, and they'll come down and they'll just buy licenses for pennies on the dollar, and they'll just chase the tuna up and down the coast from country to country, just completely destroying the natural habitat, but also taking right from the hands of the local people. And that was one of the biggest problems there, destroying equipment, killing people, corruption, all the above, paying these guys, pennies on the dollar for something that they should have been making a lot more from as an export from a country, and landing none of it. And taking it all back to Europe. So
that's another thing that I think kind of gets lost in the sauce is like when the average person, and I'll consider myself an average person, I guess I'm probably offending the average, but I think most people, especially here, when they hear about that, everyone immediately thinks of China, Japan, whatever. They don't think about the European countries. From your experience, are the Europeans just as involved as it is on that Chinese level, Japanese level? It's
not quite that high. China, 100%, still to this day has the largest foreign fleet of fishing vessels. There, you'll find Chinese fishing vessels doing sketchy activity in every reach of the world.
Yeah,
Africa's no exception. There's a lot of Chinese influence there. There's a lot of talk about reasons behind that. We could go on our own podcast all about that. We don't really have to go down that road. Yeah. But they very much have their hands in a lot of what's happening in these underdeveloped African countries, both on land and sea. So they 100% have the largest foreign fishing fleet still to this day. In the European Union, though, they do a lot of damage. In these countries, you don't think of it as much because you think of Western world, European Union. You think of European fishing vessels in the Mediterranean and all around those areas. And the truth of the matter is they've overfished and fished those spots right out. So a lot of that stuff is dead water, and they're not able to really get much of a yield from those areas anymore. So unless you're a local fisherman, kind of just doing regional stuff, the big operators are moving down to other countries, and that's why they're finding themselves in Africa every year.
It makes sense. I never even thought about it, but it makes logistically it's easy for them to just shoot straight down, and and
it's easy. It's easy for them to come in and promise things. There's a lot of corruption as well in places like Africa, so it's very easy to twist their arm and say, "Hey, well, we'll give you this, and you give us that." Yeah, and wherever that gets lost in translation or lost along the way, there's really no repercussions for it.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Huh. So amongst that, I know you were doing that kind of that interdiction side, the stuff. I know that the medical world is something that you focus on a lot. Were you introduced to that? Was there something that introduced you to that amongst that, like while you were doing that stuff, or was there an event that introduced you to it, or was it just kind of out of necessity? You had to learn the medical side.
I mean, it was a little bit of both. Definitely necessity, because you're very much out there on your own. You're at sea. Like when we were in Antarctica, for instance, the closest possible help was over 2 days away.
Yeah.
And that's like planes flying over, and and the chances of like you very much feel like you're on your own with 35 other people on board.
Right.
So you do have to be very cognizant of that. So we did take preparedness and medical training and whatnot, and having doctors on board and everything who would help to teach heads of department like myself a lot of stuff while being there on the ships. And then, of course, when you get to a place like Africa, it's the same thing. It's like, I'll take my chances on the ship. I'm not going to go to
It'll be here soon,
I'm not going to go
okay.
to that hospital.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, we did see some injuries. Fortunately, like through our organization or the organization I worked with, track record's really clean, really lucky, because there's been so many sketchy situations where like someone could have died very easily or gotten seriously injured, and it didn't happen.
That's the only thing I could think of seeing these, because in my mind, I'm watching this, and granted I was much younger and didn't know nearly as much as I know now, but I'm like, growing up, my uncle was a lobsterman. I worked on a sailboat. Like, I understand how boats work.
Sure.
To a certain extent. And I know you're not supposed to bump them into each other. And I'm like seeing that. I'm like, how is someone's going to die? This is not going to be good. Like,
yeah.
But I mean, it worked out. Like,
and that's one of the tactics have changed, because as you become in this, professional arena, you gotta stick to the rules of engagement a little bit more, But that being said, like we just being in African nations and just being on land and seeing catastrophic events take place and seeing injuries on board as well. Not so much from our side, but doing these inspections, you would get on board these fishing vessels, and there would be like an injured crew member who had severed their leg or something, and it's like they have it wrapped up with rags, and our medics treat them, and you just see that stuff, and you're like, that person's going to die if like some intervention doesn't take place. So just being cognizant of that and seeing it in the real world, and just knowing like if I'd rather us be trained, or I'd rather be trained to a high enough level where I can, respond to something if it happens to our own crew and help them out, without having to try to depend on the infrastructure that's, there in Liberia, let's say. I mean, Liberia was civil war torn country for 19 years. And it's still very much the ghost of their civil war is still there. And we spent a lot of time on land, and, I mean, the infrastructure is not what it used to be at all there. I mean, there's no animals left. They ate them all. Because there's mass starvation. Yeah. Cities are destroyed still. Like, people are making their way as people do. Yeah. Like they're figuring it out as they go. Yeah. But it's not the kind of place that I want to go, get treated for something. No, I mean, even in a developed area like in South Africa where Kevin has his house and where we all hunt at Crusader and stuff, it's like, that's developed, as developed as you can really get. And even there, like, we've had PHs tell us like, hey, don't fall here, because the hospital is really far away and it's really bad. Yeah. So you don't want to get in trouble. Yep. So I can only imagine how it's expounded upon in those areas. Oh yeah. And so you did that for how many years total, do you think? So I did it for the better part of a decade overall. I spent about 5 years in Africa working on stuff, back and forth a little bit. 2020 rolled around and obviously changed a few things. Yeah. And we were grounded. All the ships were grounded. There wasn't anything happening for a while as people sort of started to figure things out. Actually, I was doing my wife is from Spain, and we met on the way to Antarctica. Yeah. She's a professional media person. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that's really cool about our company, is that we have like a great quality of media that we're able to produce, with an internal employee. And it's my wife, part owner of the company, right? Yeah, my boss. So we get really lucky in that way. But yeah, she and I were doing a patrol, working on a patrol off the coast of France, and this COVID thing was happening or whatever, and people started to say like, have you heard about this thing off in China? And we were kind of watching the news, and interesting. That's like, a Chinese thing or whatever. And no one really thinks of it. And then they started to get a couple cases before we left in Europe. I think Spain was one of the first places to start showing cases. And we're like, that's a little close, like interesting, we've all seen, Contagion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we were kind of like, your ideas start spiraling in your head, like, oh, what's going on? So we were due to leave anyways and take leave 3 months off the ship. I was doing usually a rotation of 3 months on, 3 months off for a while.
Yeah. Where were you based out of
at that time? We got married in 2018 and we bought land out in Washington State in late 2018.
Okay.
Right
So
after the wedding.
So you were based out in the U.S. just going back and forth.
Yep. Yeah. Still, based out of the U.S. since 2019, more or less. Yeah. So then, so we were like, okay, we're heading home. So we flew home, and actually she went back to visit her family for a little bit, like right after, because they're from Spain, so it's close enough, and she doesn't always get a chance to get over there and see them. So she was visiting them. We were still watching the news, and they were talking about closing borders. And I was like, hey, you might want to think about getting back. And she's a permanent green card holder, and retrospectively, we didn't know what the rules would be, but she would have been able to get in just the same as me. But at the time, it was a little bit of a scary thought, like, you're there, and I'm here, and like, you need to get back. So she ended up booking her flight like a couple days early, flew back, and then like the next week, they closed all the borders. So we were like, okay, like, fortunately we would have been able to make it back in. Now we know, but like places like Australia went nuts, and they had, Australian citizens who were stuck in Indonesia or whatever for 6 months, couldn't get home.
Yeah. We flew,
it's insane.
We went to Africa 2021. So yeah, right after kind of everyone still kind of figured that everyone had just opened things back up.
Right.
And in Johannesburg, just seeing all the different, you could tell who was going where just based on what they had to wear. Like anyone going to China was wearing Tyvek suits, masks. It was crazy. So yeah, that was a whole weird.
It was a bizarre time in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we were basically the way we kind of, it all connects and we get to the start of the company, is 2020 rolled around, and we were twiddling our thumbs a little bit, not knowing what the future held. And we were sitting pretty, fortunately, and I'm so lucky for this, is we bought this 9 acres out in rural Washington State, at the foot of the Southern Cascades kind of, and we developed the land ourselves. We built a house by hand. A good buddy of mine who now does operations for Guerrilla Tactical, he and I and my wife bought the land together, so we kind of split it. Built 2 houses.
I've heard this story before.
And I think you met Josh at SHOT Show 2 years ago. I think he was down there.
Medical guy?
No, not a medical guy. But
no, I do know exactly what you're talking about.
Bunch of tattoos as well. Same story, bunch of old hardcore kid.
But I've heard this weird story about building a house by hand in this rural area. Okay, go on.
Yeah. The Fed showed up. No, that's a different story.
I was sawing the shotgun down.
So yeah, we timing was impeccable for us. We had the land, we built it out, finished it in 2019, more or less, livable, living there. Then when we came back in 2020, we were sitting pretty, had a great garden. Yeah. We back right up to Gifford Pinchot National Forest. So we were, when everything else was closed and you couldn't do anything or whatever, we were outside, spending time with our dogs in the woods and just like kind of living it up and, having a nice break really. Like, cause we had been going for so many years on the ships and always traveling and always being gone. But then, like, as time went on, and it didn't look like, because I figured it'd be a few weeks or something,
2 weeks,
couple months, a couple months or whatever, and we'll be back to work. And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And I was twiddling my thumbs, and I was getting a little bit bored, and I was like, well, I'm not making money right now. Like we're fine, but like I don't know what's next. You know what I mean?
You're only getting rid of money,
right? Yeah, I'm only spending money. So I was making knives, and if you look back 10 years, I did a trade, more than 10 years now, but like I did a trade with my dad back in the day while he was still alive for, he traded me some tools. So I did a job with those tools for him. That was a trade. Okay. And at the time, this would have been like 2012 or something like that. Let's say I was like, I want to make holsters. Oh. I was like, it was an idea I had way back when, way before I did any of the other stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Never happened.
And you were still kind of fresh into guns at the
I was I was like, you know what? There's not a lot of good holster companies out there right now. At that time, there wasn't. No. And I was like, hey, I think I can make holsters. So the original idea was that I traded some of these tools that I would use for making holsters to, I got them from my dad from doing this work trade. And then of course, all the stuff we just talked about happened over the course of better part of a decade. Tools were collecting dust. I never touched them again. Right. So fast forward back to 2020, I'm using some of those tools to make sheaths for knives. I was making high-end knives.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
It was just like a hobby of mine that, you know, it's like a form of art, you know what I mean? I was, you know, hammering them all out, you know, doing every step of the way. And then I got the idea to sell some because we weren't doing anything.
Right.
So I actually made a nice little clip of money, you know, in the beginning of 2020, selling mail order some knives to people, get custom orders and do a few a week or whatever. Just paying the bills and stashing some aside and putting food on the table and everything.
Ask for,
And we didn't know, we were sitting pretty. So then of course we were using Kydex to make the sheaths with these tools that years ago I was like, I want to make holsters. And then I never thought of it again. And then a couple friends hit me up and, you know, as things started to unravel with COVID and, you know, other stuff happening around the country, around the world during 2020. The people were hitting me up and saying, hey, like, we know you make knives. Can you make me a holster for my Glock or whatever? And I'm like, hey, if you buy me at that time we were using blue guns. So if you buy me the blue gun, I'll make one for you for this much. And so I kind of rolled with this business model where if you purchased the molding gun for me, then I'll make you a holster pretty cheap. Right. And then before you know it, I had 65 different models, you know, from people. Right. And, I mean, it took, I think probably 6 months. 6 months in, I wanted to do medical supplies as well, because I've always been of the belief that if you're going to carry a gun, which I think everyone should carry a gun, and I do every day, that if you're going to carry a gun, and we talked about earlier, if you can make holes, you should be able to fill those holes, right? Plug them. And coming from the background of doing a lot of medical trainings all over the globe and seeing some, you know, some sketchy stuff where it's like, good thing we had a tourniquet, you know, that kind of thing. Right. Yeah. I really wanted to implement that into the business. So as the holster game picked up and really took off, I found myself 6 months into 2020 going, okay, I don't have time to make knives anymore. I only have time to focus on holsters for people, and the numbers are growing every week. I'd also like to offer other products that I think make sense, and medical was like the main thing that I wanted to get involved with to push that on people. Because I think it's important. Everyone should carry medical supplies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that a lot of gun guys talk a big game about. They'll say, "Yeah, I'm in the same mindset. We should have medical stuff," and then they just don't. Or they'll buy it all and they have no idea how to. Like, they've never packed a wound before, or even thought of packing a wound. They just don't. They're like, well, I've got it. Someone around will know how to use it. It's like, that's not good enough.
Well, that's one of the things too, is that, like, it's, you know, I was joking around. It's like, medical stuff is not sexy. It's not. You're not kicking indoors doing CQB classes, right? Yeah. What are you much more likely to use? Like room clearing with your team of 4 guys, or, you know, you rock up on a car accident on the way to work. Right. Like, it's not even, in my mind, it's not even always about stab wounds or gunshot wounds or anything like that. It's about just general injuries that take more than just a Band-Aid. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so stopping that hemorrhage control.
I think I saw, he's not, admittedly, I don't think he's the biggest fan of the company, but Slade Cutcher, I believe, posted I think his kid slipped on like a dog gate and it punctured his leg, and Slade threw a tourniquet on his kid, brought him to the hospital or whatever. And it's like, that's an everyday Slade was a SEAL. Yeah. Saw everything, whatever. But
we know Slade.
But the reality of using his tourniquet is his kid hurt himself. Yeah. Like, that's going to happen. You're with your kid every day. Or
that's why we say carry medical supplies, not just because you carry a firearm. Right. Because, like, and to be fair, like, we've had many people hit us up and say, hey, there was a shooting and we used your kit. Yeah. And we actually, to this day, if you hit us up with the real story, we'll help refill your kit for you. Because like, we want to promote, like, the training and the carrying. And, like, if someone used our kit to actually save someone's life, then, like, we're extremely happy to replace that combat gauze they used to pack that wound or whatever. Like, I mean, like, it's nothing to us, and that we're doing it because we want people to be more prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. We kind of talked about it a little bit at lunch, and I mean, I asked you just because I know you carry the product. But I think even before getting into the details, I see you do question and answers on YouTube Instagram every now and again. I'm always curious, like, if you were to get the question, or I'm sure you do get the question all the time, bare minimum, like, what do you think everyone should carry bare minimum. And I mean like gun include, like gun, knife, tourniquet, or gun, flashlight, whatever. Like, what is the bare minimum that you think people should realistically use and know how to use? Obviously, don't carry it if you don't know how to use it. But
so what I carry on a daily basis is when we created a product, two products actually, just for this reason, because I think sometimes the best innovation comes from solutions to your own problems. Not because we were sitting around in a meeting thinking about, okay, what product can we make that's going to sell the most of? It's like, what product can we make that will make it easier for all of us in this room right now to carry what we want to carry?
Right. And we talked about that at the other building with those fixtures with engineers.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'm not a fanny pack guy too much. You know, when I worked over in Ukraine, we carried them because it's like a super convenient way to have everything you want right in front of you. But like on a daily basis, I'm not carrying a sling pack or even a backpack or a fanny pack or any of that stuff. And if you do, awesome. I know people who carry
more room. Yeah.
Yeah. And they carry full IFAKs on them everywhere they go.
Yeah.
Cause I always tell people too, and like, Grizzly Medical is a great training resource.
Yeah.
He works on the West Coast and we took him to Ukraine with us and he helped train, combat medics down there. But, he does this in his class and we've taken it on, and I tell people, it's like, where's your IFAK? And they say, oh, it's in my car. And I'll grab their arm and say, go get your tourniquet. And they can't because I'm holding them, right? And it's just like such a silly thing to do, but it shows them in real time that like, oh, it needs to be on my person.
Right.
So we created a thing called the Keep It Simple Med Pack, or the KISS Med Pack. Yep. And it's gone through a couple iterations, and right now I think it's in its best one right now with the best clip options. And it's a pretty incredible little thing. It's very simple in design, and it does just what it's meant to do. It carries Z-fold combat gauze, twin chest seals, and gloves, and it's all together in a nice kit, and it fits all anywhere along your waist. Yep. I like to run it down my thigh, on my right thigh, for instance. Can still carry a gun, all that, and you just pull a tab out, and it comes out immediately with everything you want.
That's awesome.
Right in front of you.
And those three things, like, that's another thing too. It's like, you get into that area of because I know a lot of guys that'll same thing. Oh, well, I've got whatever, a tourniquet on me, and I've got my IFAK in my truck, and it's like, okay, well, what's in your IFAK? And they got NCDs, they've got all these things, and it's like, you don't know how to use any of those, dude. Like, just get stuff that you know how to use.
Yep.
And those, like what you just said, like those, you're going to use those predominantly anyway. Statistically, that's what you're going to use the most.
And I would say obviously a tourniquet, it's not meant to hold like a cat. Cats are pretty big.
Right.
It doesn't hold a tourniquet in that KISS Med Pack, but that's why we made our expedient carry system.
Right.
Which is designed around the Snake Staff ETQ and ETQ wide.
Yep.
Because when Snake Staff came out with that tourniquet, I reached out to them and commended them for it, because like up until then, your options were, XYZ tourniquets, most of them being too big, especially like a Cat 7.
Cat 7's huge.
I mean, they're proven, tried and tested over the years. They're amazing, right? Yeah. But most people are not carrying them. So when they came out with this pocket size tourniquet, I was like, this is great, because this is going to promote people to more easily carry tourniquets. But there was no good option out there for how to carry that tourniquet on you. So a lot of people were just throwing them in their pocket.
Which is what I was doing with that. Wrapping
them in like nylon or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we made the expedient carry system, which clips right onto your, like where a pocket knife would go. Yep. And it fits around.
Do you still have it on
I
you?
do have one on me.
Yeah. You can, if you hold it up by the mic, you should be able to see it.
So yeah, it's this little cool little simple piece of kit. This is a ETQ, like the smaller version, and it just clips right onto your pocket like a pocket knife. It has adjustable retention. And then this allows you to deploy it 2 fingers. You just pull it right out, and you can put this tourniquet on one-handed.
Yeah. Assuming you pre-staged your tourniquet.
Yeah, you should always pre-stage your tourniquet too. That's why we get people being like,
it's in the wrapper.
Mine's in the wrapper. We even did a video on it about how to stage your tourniquets properly.
Yeah.
There's different ways, but
and that one is a little different than
it is a little
Cat
different.
7,
Yep. But that comes down to the whole thing of, just like you have a firearm, like, and this might be a little bit of a hot topic for some, or a hot take, I should say. Yeah, but hey, I think it's important to say is, like, if you're not competent enough to shoot your pistol, then you're a liability carrying your pistol.
100%.
And the same thing goes for a lot of medical supplies. And that's one reason why I think a lot of people are afraid to carry. They say, hey, well, I'm not going to carry all this IFAK stuff because I don't know what I'm doing. Right. And that's fair. Because
it's a smart idea, to recognize that, because no one wants to say, I don't know how to do it.
Right. And I commend people for taking that step and saying, well, I don't know how to use a tourniquet. So like, I feel like I could be a liability. Yeah. Now, that being said, there's something to be said about having it on you. Maybe you're on the scene with it and you don't know what you're doing, but I'm on the scene as well. And I know what I'm doing. Now I should carry my own stuff, but let's say I don't, I know how to use that tourniquet. Right.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about carrying it anyways. I mean, but that's why training is so paramount. And a lot of this stuff, it's not rocket science. It's not hard. Yeah. Like a lot of this stuff is made to be intuitive to use, in stressful situations. I mean, TCCC, combat guidelines for all of applications is like, there's care under fire, and it's like high and tight on your tourniquet, get that person to safety and then start going down the checklist.
Right.
But it's like, you should have a basic understanding, and it's not very hard. Even if you take a stop to bleed class, it's better than nothing.
I mean, to a point, I think it's probably, for the overwhelming majority of people, I think it's probably a better idea to get a basic to intermediate level of understanding, because we talked about it before, and I've heard it talked about before as well, but it's like, if you and I were walking back from lunch and saw a car crash and we helped out and we had to put a tourniquet on somebody, we're going to put the tourniquet on them. And maybe that's all we know. Maybe that's the extent of our knowledge. But realistically, hopefully in the US, emergency services are going to be right behind us. And maybe it's a few minutes. And we got them to a position that we're comfortable with. We know how to do it. We'll keep them whatever. And then the professionals are going to come in.
Do a handover to the professionals when they show up. Yeah.
And so like to an extent, because again, I always think with everything, and you see it so much with guns, and I can only imagine in the medical space, but it's like ego is a real thing.
Yeah.
If you give everyone all of the knowledge, they should be able to have all the knowledge. But if you just give them all the knowledge, they get into that situation, are they going to confuse things? Are they going to try to go beyond where they should? Are they going to start, like, I know a lot of IFACs, and it's probably for other reasons, but they stopped putting needle chest decompression, needles
the darts,
because people were fucking people up with them.
Yeah. I mean, that takes a much higher level of training than just, packing a wound with combat gauze or putting a tourniquet on somebody properly. So it's like, I mean, there's a reason why that stuff's out of there, because in most civilian kits, those people don't have the right training. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you can do damage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's good for people to be honest with themselves about what they're capable of.
Yeah.
And like, for sure, if you're a switched on person and you want to be as prepared as possible, then train up to the highest level you can possibly get.
Yeah.
If you can afford it, if you have the time, whatever that might be, take in as much of that knowledge as possible, and then do reps with it, because a tourniquet's no different than, dry firing your handgun.
Exactly.
If you don't take, you can even use a tourniquet off Amazon, just write trainer on it, because you should never carry that, Chinese crap.
Yeah.
I did a video a couple SHOT shows ago with Mura demonstrating Chinese tourniquets and how they just break when you start turning the windlass and cranking on them. Well,
realistically too, even a Cat 7, it's a single use.
Yes. Anyway. I mean, that's a really good point. With any of that stuff is also a consumable item that is like, especially if you carry, like if you are a fanny pack kind of person, and you have it like tucked under. Some of these fanny packs have like the little strip of nylon that you can put it under there. Yeah. Like, you should be replacing those tourniquets every 6-7 months, whether or not you used it or not, because the sun breaks them down and they become weaker elements. If you're like, we were working on ships all the time and you have salt water, you have to be cognizant about, just like breaking stuff down. But I mean, you should have a couple training tourniquets. You can buy, like, if you want to buy the real ones, they're not overly expensive to buy the real ones. There's blue ones that are marked as trainers, and kind of in the medical world, the blue stuff is the trainer stuff. And you can buy one of those, write trainer on it, and then you can just get reps, reset your tourniquet, get reps on them, on your friends, on you, on your girlfriend,
your dog,
whatever.
Maybe not your dog.
Maybe not your dog.
Your dad.
Your dad. Yeah, you totally get on your dad. People should get reps and train. And same thing with wound packing as well. Like, there's a good way to do it and there's the wrong way to do it. And a lot of people don't understand the right way of maintaining pressure and how that works. So, I mean, with like anything, you're going to dry fire your pistol, you should. Mm-hmm. You're going to carry it. You should be getting reps in medical. So take a class, even like a basic stop to bleed is going to get you started. I think that what we're seeing now is a shift towards a higher level of training in medical, which is good to see, because stop to bleed courses are becoming kind of like kind of the hemorrhage control equivalent to going and taking your basic first aid CPR class.
Yeah.
It's like, you could tell me, I'm like, have you ever done medical training? And you could say, oh yeah, I have basic CPR at the YMCA or whatever. I'm like, cool. You know what I mean? Like, that's a good start.
Yeah.
But it's a basic foundation to build off of. And you should, strive to achieve more, because you won't be you'll be set up to help some, but you can do it online in 25 minutes.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's not really, so Stop to Bleed is a little bit more in depth than that. I think a lot of people are running courses for 2 or 3 hours. Mm-hmm. Typically when we do them, it's like a hemorrhage control course, kind of like a first responder, civilian responder kind of course. And they'll end up being 2 days, because you can fill up half the day on just proper tourniquet use and stemming the flow of blood and how that all works.
Now, do you see, because you're so much closer to it than I think most of us here, we see it on the gun side where you got to vet your trainer. Is that a similar thing in the medical world? Because I know of people that are still talking about using tampons to plug wounds and shit, and that's how you get people killed. But
dude, I won't say names, but when we went to Ukraine the second time, we were down in Odessa training medics, and a reputable training outfit had been down there for 2 weeks prior to us, working with some of the same crossover guys. And those guys were coming to our classes with tampons in their packs. And we're going, why do you have this? And they're like, oh, the last people told us that we should have them. And come to find out, it's, SEALs that haven't been in since 2001. Yeah. And you're like, guidelines have changed. Like, you can find that information out. Like,
even since, it's crazy because we just talked about tourniquet, and like we talked about the basic necessities. If you're going to carry just one piece of medical, like every day, one piece of medical equipment, a tourniquet's probably your best bet.
Probably, yeah.
I went through basic training in 2013.
Yeah.
We were still being taught tourniquet is last resort, which is crazy.
Tourniquets are an interesting one because they've kind of done this umbrella a little bit, and a lot of the data coming out of Ukraine is showing these differences, because the warfare that like the U.S. has been engaged with for the last 20 something years is so far different than like what you think of when you think of like trench warfare, like what's happening in Ukraine. With closed airspaces, no air evac available, so they're finding that they have to resort to other means, because there's some data out there that's showing that almost 50% of the limbs that have had prolonged tourniquet use on them are getting amputated. Yeah. And that's not something that like the US ever had to worry about over in the Middle East, because
because you hear now too, like statistically, if you look at the global war on terror, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. You can find them, but it's like the amount of lives that could have been saved if we had just gone tourniquet straight to them, knowing that you have a Casevac, you have all that. Clearly a different situation, but it's like even during that time, like 2013 was about almost halfway through, more than halfway through the GWAT, still being taught. Granted, I was in the Air Force, so I was not an 11 Bravo. I was not like wasn't a Marine, so our medical knowledge is pretty limited. But
you still learned about tourniquets,
right? But as a last resort, which I'm just like, whoa, dude, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, the whole thing of tourniquets save lives is still true. Yeah, tried and true.
And I would think, especially in a civilian sense, where we talk about having those emergency services coming behind you, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yep. In regular day-to-day life here in the place like the United States, where you do have, other outside higher up medical authority that can be there in, minutes sometimes, like stopping the flow like that, doing that hemorrhaging control is of the utmost importance, because people can bleed out so quickly, much faster than emergency services can arrive on scene. And so that's why it's so important, like for, learning at least the basics in carrying medical supplies, because in this situation, if you're talking about being in a third world country, I'm going to probably think about some other options if I don't know when this person's going to be able to get to higher care.
Sit here for 4 days, maybe tourniquet's not the option.
Right. Yeah. So in everyday life, like here, it shouldn't be any issue at all, and tourniquets 100% save lives. So I would definitely say here in the U.S., like if you're going to carry one piece of medical kit and know how to use it and everything, tourniquet's probably your best bet still. Yeah, for sure.
That makes sense.
We had a guy, kind of just like back to when we started selling medical supplies and kind of realizing like, oh, okay, wow, we have a real business model on our hands. Was we were, I don't know, it was some weekend where, you know, something happened in the US and someone got shot or killed or something like that. And it went nuts. Like, we didn't even have all this stuff in stock because I'd never sold this many kits. And we sold so many kits over the course of a weekend that I had to spend the next 2 weeks sourcing supplies to build them out. And I was like, okay, there's a real need for this stuff. So that's why we started working with North American Rescue soon after that. And now we have all of our own, you know, pre-packaged, pre-labeled kits that we've set up through them. But we had a guy hit us up who was in California somewhere, 45 minutes from the closest hospital, kind of rural desert shooting situation. And a guy like jumbled his draw on his 45 and shot straight down his leg and through his foot.
Oof.
He sent the dude sent me photos and everything. And he said, I had your IFAC, like one of the early ones that we had built out, you know? And he goes, I had your IFAC and basic level training. And I went right to it and applied a tourniquet, packed the wound, all the above, immediately stopped the flow of blood on this guy. And then it took 45 minutes for the ambulance to get there. And then the doctor who pulled the bullet out and cleaned him up and, you know, got him on his way came up to this guy who messaged me. He said, hey, are you the one that applied medical to this guy right after the incident? He said, yes. He goes, well, you saved your friend's life, because otherwise he would have bled out far before the ambulance could have gotten there with this injury. Yeah. And that
may not even had to have been like the femoral artery type deal, like whatever. It just 45 minutes is a long time.
Yeah. It's a long time to bleed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are the stories that we get on a semi-regular basis. Yeah. And as unfortunate it is that this is happening to people, getting those stories and getting that feedback that our gear was used to do that and to save lives is like one of the main driving forces of why we continue to push that.
It's cool to see that kind of zeitgeist change too, because I mean, I grew up around here locally and my family, I have family in law enforcement. I have a lot of family that are kind of essentially just woodsmen that I grew up around guns. I grew up hunting and all that. And so I've been interested in guns my entire life. So it's like, I don't remember hearing about medical until within the last probably 10 years.
Absolutely.
Becoming no one talked about it.
No one carried it.
It was always just like, oh, that's for a professional. You're not a professional, don't take it. Like, or my buddy was a medic in the Army. He'll be around. Like, that's it.
He's got some Band-Aids.
Yeah. And so now it is cool to see that. I mean, everyone emphasizes if you're going to carry a gun, train with it. But you're also seeing a lot of these people who are, I mean, realistically, they're influencers for better or worse. But they're pushing that, hey, you should also think about getting trained medically as well. And I think that's super important. It's cool to see.
Yeah.
And I think you see it mostly with this generation that's coming up.
It is, yeah.
It's awesome. I think it's a super positive thing. Even like mostly for the everyday shit, like not for shootings. It's not even so much for like, there's a fucking mass shooting. It's just like the amount of times people, and I'm sure you see it with anyone sending in anything with your gear where it's like, oh, this dude, whatever, car crash. This dude fell on a fence and punctured himself or whatever, that kind of thing. And it's like, that's the reality of things. And it's cool that I think we're becoming a more prepared generation in general.
And there's a shift for that I see. And I always make the joke, like, I don't consider myself an influencer on Instagram, or I hope not, right? Yeah. But if I am going to influence people to do something, being more prepared, carrying medical supplies, it's like, I'm okay to influence that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's cool to see a shift in like kind of this generation, this next gen gun culture with the medical supplies, with the training, with comms. Like you have companies like Mojave Repeater, who are really putting out tremendous content for everyday people. They're using their professional experience of the past to transfer that knowledge to everyday people.
Yeah. And it's cool because he's using attainable resources for the everyday person.
Yep.
Because I know like everyone all the cool guys everyone follows, you're seeing them use all the wave relay stuff and all that. And it's like, yeah, that's cool, but is that realistic for you? And are you going to go buy that? But all the Mojave Repeater stuff is $15 radio, and what you're capable of doing with it.
Yeah, insane. I mean, you could spend $1,000 with something that Mojave's pushing on you, but like $1,000 is a drop in the bucket between having an MPU 5 with a full loadout that would cost you $28,000.
Right.
It's like,
sure, it's
the cool guy thing. People were playing Call of Duty on the, and you're like, but like, that's not obtainable for most people. So no, we're big proponents of it, through our company. And that's why we really like to work with other companies in the space of the similar generation that are pushing that same preparedness mindset that DIY ethic that I grew up with as a child, that we're pushing that into adulthood and into this space.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's no reason not to be as prepared in this world as possible.
Right.
I mean, we carry a gun for a reason. You should carry medical supplies. You should have, basic necessities taken care of. Comms is another big one. Mm-hmm. It's cool to see that.
I mean, a tourniquet costs 30, as much as a box of ammo.
$30.
Pistol.
Yeah. I mean, like $30. Like it's not. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what happens whether you die or someone dies from bleeding out, or has to have much higher level of care rendered to them, and then it's you're paying thousands of dollars to.
And I mean, it goes to the ego type thing where it's like I think there's so many people that think if something were to happen, this stressful situation, I'm gonna rise to the occasion. I'm gonna be the guy.
Yeah,
but years and decades and probably centuries of examples of this, we know that it's very rare that humans rise to an occasion. It's more so you fall back to your level of training.
Right.
So it's like the guy that doesn't carry tourniquet and is like, well, I'll just use my belt. Like, we know that's not going to work. And you're probably going to forget to take your belt off when this happens. Like, but when you get that level of training, if you're falling back to the level of training and your level of training is intermediate and mine is none, you're going to help out exponentially more than I will ever do. I'm only going to hinder the problem or hinder the outcome. But yeah, I think it's ego is a huge thing, and it's big in guns, and obviously I can see the crossover with the medical side of stuff too.
For sure.
And
ego is a big problem all around.
Absolutely, yeah, everywhere, yeah. As far as what you guys offer as a company, obviously the holster, the medical gear side, and I know in the past you've set up working with other companies, whether it be for comms, Mojave Repeater, or the medical side. Can people go onto your website, sign up for classes, or is that a thing? Like
we used to do more class related stuff, but we just got so busy with general day-to-day operations and production and wholesale and doing all the other things that we've expanded into. We've added more retail SKUs this year than ever, and we're going to continue to do so. So you can now come to us for your most popular lights and optics and things like that. Just stuff that goes along with what we already sell, like holsters being, the center, the glue that holds it all together, and then everything that kind of goes with it. Branching off into some different product lines, a little bit of nylon, stuff like that. Again, all based around like the everyday carry market.
Yeah.
But as far as training goes, we don't offer any training anymore. Sometimes we'll collab on setting up a training. Like we've had, Grizzly Medical, for instance, come up to the area and, helped set up and run, even want to be one of the cadre for a couple of day class here and there. But mostly what we do now is we point people in the right direction.
Right.
So people that we've worked with, so I have firsthand experience working with these people, knowing that they're vetted. Like you said earlier, is it important to vet all your instructors? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot, like ego, right back to ego. There's a lot of people that want to feel importance. And you see it a lot too in Ukraine. You saw it a lot in Ukraine. People go over there, oh, I did this, I'm that, I'm this, and then you come to find out that it's all a joke.
Yeah.
And they don't really know anything, and they're actually causing people to lose their life. Yeah. And you're like, come on.
Happened in Afghanistan too, weirdly.
Absolutely.
Very
over
famous.
there. You see it over there in Kurdistan, whatever. Yeah. You see it all in any place like that where someone can be in the spotlight and be a cool guy or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Look what I did.
Yeah. And it sucks that happens, because like you're talking about loss of life. You're not talking about like,
exactly.
something that doesn't matter.
Yeah. A sports game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Are you open to, like, for anyone who watches this who maybe wasn't familiar with your company before?
Yep.
I know it's so hard to manage, and I know you have a team though as well, but if people have questions, can they come to you and say, hey, look, I saw you on the podcast, I want to get into this. Can you just recommend me a basic whatever?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the thing. Customer experience is huge for us.
Yeah.
As a consumer myself, when I'm dealing with other companies out there, like how I'm treated is super important to me. And we want to, carry that through and through with our company as well. So we're happy to answer questions to the best of our ability. Yeah. And if we don't know them, we'll put you in the right direction.
Yep.
Because it all goes together. Like we're all trying to help each other out here, is my opinion. We're trying to get more and more people prepared and just generally, more on the ready.
Yeah.
So through what we do, we point people in the right direction, whether it be like Core Vision training or, Mojave Repeater, Grizzly Medical, just to name a few. There's some good outfits out there.
Yeah.
One podcast I really like as well for like medical related stuff is Guerrilla Medic.
Okay.
I've never met the guy. He's a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
But he extremely knowledgeable, has a bunch of great real world experience, years under his belt. And he talks a lot from the point of view of like the guerrilla medic in the US. So like, let's say, things continue to decline a little bit more as they may be doing. And we have to be more and more ready and prepared to, be our own first responder. He talks a lot from that point of view, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super interesting. And I think it's cool too that, even to kind of piggybacking on that question that I asked as far as pointing in the right direction, that kind of thing. I think that that's something that, to kind of bring it back to what I said at the beginning, where it's like this newer generation, I think for the most part, at least not necessarily consumer wise, but I think within the industry, I think you're seeing a lot more openness to collaboration.
Yeah.
Like in a world, realistically, we're all competitors of one another. Like we all have a good to sell. And if you and I sell the same thing, we're technically in competition. But we talked about it off air where it was like, oh, have you heard of this company? You're like, yeah, they make stuff that we don't make. And if people ask me for something, then I refer to them to that. And we do it in a roundabout way.
Sure.
And sometimes we're a bit snarky about it where it's like, if you want a 12-pound gun, go to this company, whatever. Right. But it's like, there are things that people want that maybe we don't offer.
Yep.
And I personally have no problem being like, well, if that's what if I can't change your mind and you don't want this, if you want that, I can tell you someone who will do that, and they'll do it at you can trust that they'll do it at a high level. And I think that that's a cool thing to see. And it's, realistically, it's funny because, so I'm younger than you by a couple of years. You kind of, would you say that you got into the industry in 2020? Is that?
Yeah, I'd say that's safe to say that I kind of fell into this industry during 2020. Yep.
Yeah. And so
adjacent to it for many years, just as a consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think professionally in the industry, so I've been in the industry directly since 2015, almost 10 years.
Yep.
But I think over those years, I started at a low level doing stuff in a factory for SIG, basically. And so it's not, my voice didn't matter. It wasn't a thing. But I think as time has gone, it's cool to see that even though I've been kind of directly in it for almost a decade and you have been in it for a few years at this point directly, it's cool to see generationally. I think we're all on a similar, but it makes me feel better about the industry because
I think so. Yeah.
Being in the industry, and I'm sure you see it even just in the few years that you've been directly involved in the SHOT Shows and all that, this industry is as small as it is. And it's the only industry that we're the two-way community.
Right.
And we treat each other like shit. Like everyone hates each other.
Yeah. It's pretty bad.
Everybody sells the same product and is trying to tell you, the consumer, they fucking suck. We're the best. And it's like both of your products get made in the same factory.
Right.
And I think, at least in my mind, I think because we're so small, and I think you feel similarly, but we're so small, each place is the best at whatever they do.
Sure.
It's like, if that's the case, we should be collaborating with one another and making the best thing in the world.
Right.
Because everyone ends up winning. The consumer gets the best product.
Yep.
We're all going to make money. It doesn't make sense to me. I think I just can't get behind everybody. And you see it mostly with the consumer. I'm so bad at Reddit. I'm so new at Reddit, but whenever I go on there and just look at NFA or whatever, I'm just like, you guys are all the most miserable people on the planet.
I think I'm too old for Reddit.
I can't
do it.
I'm just technologically ridiculous. So I can't figure it out, but I just see it. I'm like, you're a consumer and I know that you think you know what you're talking about. I promise you don't.
Right.
And that's not everyone. I'm speaking generally. But it's just like, why? How do you have so much hatred in you? This blind loyalty, especially when you talk about the influencer side of things, where it's like, dudes simping over other grown men who don't know your name, and you'll die on the cross for them. It's wild to me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it's definitely bizarre to see that.
It's so strange. And I think I say these things about hey, we should, and I'm not trying to be hippy dippy, let's all hold hands and be together, because there are still things that are objectively dumb. For sure. That gun that SIG just did, the Renegade or whatever, the MCX fucking thing, that's stupid.
Why?
Well, I can see through it. It's they were worried about ARs and braces and stuff, and then they spent a bunch of money making it, so put it out. There's still dumb shit out there. There's
for sure
cans that weigh fucking 2 pounds that aren't that quiet or this or that. It's so I have no problem being that's fucking dumb.
Sure.
But to just be to just have this blind loyalty to a company and you don't
just
know.
because.
Just because, or like
you read something once or whatever.
Right. And I understand the idea of like humans being tribal, and it makes sense,
Sure.
but I think it is cool to see the younger generation. And we talked about it, and a lot of people won't understand it, but we talked about it at lunch, where it's, you look at I think our backgrounds, like growing up in that hardcore scene, where it's that huge background of everyone is involved. It's like
in some shape or form, everybody's involved. Even if you don't, you're all under the same umbrella of something, but you don't necessarily all see eye to eye or agree on everything, but everybody has involvement and you're all there for a similar reason.
Exactly. And
it makes a big difference.
100%. And I think it carries on into business and into interactions, like that interpersonal, like the group of guys that we all get along with. Like, I don't want to say our group of guys, but this kind of small circle, this little kind of like an echo chamber, but like a positive echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly. You're not just like screaming at the wall or preaching to the choir.
And like we all get, every time we're at SHOT Show, it's you see this group of guys all sitting together, and it's all the shithead tattooed idiots. Right. But like we all came from a similar background, and we all feel the same way. Like, yo, you work for this company and our companies have beef, but you need something from me. Dude, let me help you out. Like,
and I kind of have an interesting take on the holster side of thing. I was kind of telling you earlier is like, there's so many people, new gun owners popping up every single day in this country. Every single day in this country, that even if all of the holster makers, maybe the better part of 200 or more makers in the country that we're a part of, got together and all pooled their resources and made holsters, there would still not be enough Kydex holsters at the end of any given year to supply every single person who's getting a new gun with a holster. So as much as that we're in competition in the sense that, you know, this company is doing a special thing with their style holster, and then this one's trying to be more comfortable. You know, everyone's trying to have the best holster, right? It makes sense, right? Of course. You want to be new, innovative, you want to be comfortable, concealable, all the, safe, all the above. But like, there's enough room within holsters, for instance, for everybody to eat. Right. And a lot of room for growth still.
And that's an interesting kind of way to look at it too, because at Q, like you got a tour of the whole place, and we're not huge. I mean, we're a bigger company now, but I mean, in the reality of it, and I've talked to Kevin about it, and he's kind of just sort of off air, him just telling me like, and this was a few years ago, this is kind of before we grew to the level that we're at now, and we're continuously growing, but he basically told me, he's like, I don't need to be the biggest company. I don't need to be SIG. I don't need to be any of that. He's like, if I can capture 10% of the industry, or like the consumer base in the industry, he's like, that keeps the lights on. It allows me to keep doing the innovations that I want to make. It allows me to do what I want to do. That's what I need. Granted, there's things, it's not as simple as just doing that. Obviously you have to grow to be able to continue doing that. And especially as the consumer base grows, that 10% is now exponentially more people than it was before. So you have to grow, but it is cool where it's like, the gun industry is not exactly the same holster wise. Like, I guess realistically, but it's just, there's so many more gun companies that it's like, you do have to knock this person or do something better than this person, do something better, where realistically, if you have this entire sea of people, none of the holster companies should be fighting with each other or negging each other. I
mean, there's certain stuff that we just can't physically offer every single model, because there's a lot of dumb handguns out there that people like to carry for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into that, but if you write us about it, I'm happy to give you my opinion, but in a nice way, and I'll steer you in a better way. But that being said, like, we can't possibly make every single option for every single gun out there, right? Just, it's like, it would be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of selections. And there are companies that have been around longer than us that make more than we do. And we have a very strong lineup of 40 something models right now, very popular pistols. And we're always adding to that
with accessories as well.
Different, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand is they think of like, oh, there's a mold with a light and that's it. No, but it's like, you have to have all these different cut paths. You need to have all these different molds that, accompany the specific light and the specific gun and the specific length and the specific attachment and all this. So it becomes a lot. For like Glock 19, for instance, we have countless molds that, for this one specific type of pistol. And it's a very popular type of pistol, obviously. But if we don't have it, people write us all the time on a daily basis. Hey, we're looking for this. And maybe if it's a new gun that we are going to be adding, we'll say, hey, Q3 this year, whatever, we're going to have it, whatever. And then, if you want to wait, good. If not, go get it somewhere else. You know what I mean? Because like, the reality is like, we're in it because yes, it is our main source of money. Like, it is a business. It is all that we do. But at the same time, like, we're in it because we want to see people more prepared, and we want to see people trained and carrying medical supplies and carrying good quality holsters with their firearms, to promote a safer, more prepared person on a daily basis, right? And if we don't have it, then I have no problem at all saying these 3 companies have it. Like, we try to do our research, and like, not because we're trying to keep tabs on other companies, but because we want to be able to help the consumer. Because I know how it is to be a consumer. And if I reach out to somebody and they take 2 weeks to get back to me and they give me a short answer and they're kind of snarky about something, and because I asked a simple question, then I'm going to be less likely to help that.
Right.
It's not a good customer experience.
Yeah.
So, we are always growing our holster development. We have a lot of big plans this year to add a lot of things and change some stuff up with our production line, which is cool. And we make a very competitive, good quality product that we personally carry on a daily basis, and we entrust our lives with it. But, there's a lot of good companies out there. I'm not going to say that we're better than others. So, like, there's a lot of, there's probably 20 solid holster makers out there around the nation. And if they make something that works better for you, then you should go with them, because I want to promote carrying your firearm.
Right.
So,
would you say that that's kind of the ethos of Guerrilla Tactical, is that desire for people in general to be prepared, to be protected, is that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good ethos of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I'm kind of a history buff myself over the years. Read up a lot on different conflicts over the years and in different struggles. And, there's always that, like in Kurdistan's a perfect example. I know you've been over there. They're the underdogs, right?
Absolutely.
And they've been fighting back against this war for a long time.
Successfully
fighting back. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's super cool to see. So I think when you think of Guerrilla Tactical, when I first kind of conceptualized the brand and what the name was, it was kind of a nod in the direction of all these rebellious people throughout history, whether it's the United States or before. And that's kind of where we came up with that, and that plays right into being that prepared everyday person.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you, I just kind of to focus more on a tail end or sort of wrap things. What I know you don't have to go in depth on this machine or that machine, but what's the future look like for Guerrilla? And I know you have other business ventures as well, but or projects. But what do you kind of, for the viewer, what is kind of that future? This is our next couple years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, for Guerrilla Tactical, it's definitely directly working with the current products that we have, offering more, and then solidifying our systems and how we do things so that we can be even faster and even more efficient for you. We already have some of the fastest shipping on the West Coast. That's a big thing for us. I mean, we're not Amazon, nor are we trying to be. There is a limit to that, but in my opinion, whether it be medical supplies, whether it be a holster or whatever else, if it's sitting half made in our warehouse and not in your hands, then what good is that to you? So we want to be able to get that. I mean, the days, I believe, and I think this kind of caught on the last year and a half, 2 years with holster companies, is like people used to have 16-week lead times on custom holsters. And it's like 16 weeks.
Right.
You need to get some better machinery, hire a couple more people. Like, that's insane, right?
Yeah.
And we went through phases of having long lead times, nothing that long ever, but easily 3, 4, or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Trying to keep up with workflow. And with the new building, we've been able to really solidify our systems so that we're more efficient than ever. Holsters are better than ever, more efficient than ever. All the QC, all that stuff, we're able to really handle a little bit better. And yeah, for me, it's like we want to continue to improve on those systems that we can get this stuff out as fast as possible. I think we're going to add a quick ship option coming up pretty soon, which is going to be cool, I think, for a lot of people. I think we're going to offer a bit more than what normal companies offer for their quick ships. So there's going to be a few more options there.
I was going to say, that's cool. Hard. Like, it's hard to kind of, you want to be able to quick ship as much as possible, but then once you go to a certain amount of variety, then it's just like, then it's not quick ship anymore. It's not,
exactly. Yeah. So there's a happy medium there, and I think we're trying to figure that out. So that's kind of exciting. And then just, solidifying our processes and making better than ever holsters. We're going to be moving in machinery mid to end of this year that's going to allow us to have much more control over in-house mold creation, which is going to allow us to not only have a better custom look. So when you see one of our holsters, other than, you know, just the clip saying our name, you're like, oh, that's a GT holster.
Yeah.
And then also put in years of experience of carrying and feedback into our molds and making tweaks here and there. That's going to, you know, hopefully produce one of the best concealing, you know, most comfortable holsters on the market.
Yeah.
So that's definitely the future for us. That's
you're already on that road for sure. I mean, I told you before, like even that it's so hard with everyone calling it something different, but even that sidecar style, your gun with a magazine, your holster, if I see yours in a lineup, I know it's yours.
Yep.
And that's cool. That's awesome. To me, it shows that you're doing something right. Like, I mean, it's the same as if you walk into a gun store and you look at the wall, you can tell there's FQs there. Like our guns are different colors. They look different.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really cool. And it's cool to see a similar thing, a similar kind of event happening in another environment. Cause we see, I mean, we get so tunnel visioned with guns and the next gun and this and that. It's hard to see outside into the adjacent spaces. And it's cool to see kind of that innovation side in other stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. And I feel like, you know, we started in middle of 2020 and here we are, I guess, moving into 2024, started the second quarter already. And, you know, I feel like we're just getting started.
Absolutely.
Like, and I feel like the sky's the limit and, you know, we've already made some big strides, which has been super cool to see.
I didn't realize that it started in 2020 because you've already accomplished so much.
Yeah.
And granted, like I can only name 5 or 6 holster companies,
but GT is one of them.
That is one of them. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the thing is like, I see your holster just as much as I see everybody, the other companies that I can name. I see them online and I'm sure it's algorithmic because it's like, because I follow you, because I
interact.
We have a lot of mutual friends.
Sure. Absolutely.
I'm sure it's because of that, but like even people that I don't, whether it's in my Explore page or whatever, people I don't interact with, I'm seeing your holster more and more. And to me, I'm like, that's awesome. You're getting the recognition you deserve. You're putting in the work and getting your product out there.
Yep.
And then I remember like, oh, it's only a couple years old. Like you're only going to blow up.
Well, people ask us a lot we try to do weekly questions and answers and that kind of stuff and be accessible to our following. And, you know, people ask us like, oh, well, how have you had so much luck or success in the industry since, you know, being quite a new company still? And I tell them like, pretty honestly, it's like being a genuine, real person.
100%.
Takes a long ways.
Yeah.
It takes you a long ways. And people don't understand that. And like whether I might have a much different background than a lot of people in the industry, but here we all are.
Yeah. And I think we talked for 20 minutes before at SHOT Show before I knew where you were from.
Right.
Like before we even discussed like, oh, Q, whatever.
Right.
It just, and that goes so far.
Yeah.
And I've noticed it like in my world, like I don't, like you run the company, you are Guerrilla Tactical. I'm just a dickhead who works here. I don't run the company. Kevin is Q, whatever. But like just getting along with people and taking the time to talk to people for 5-10 minutes or whatever has opened so many doors. Like I've met so many people through it. And I'm stoked to call certain people my friends to where it's like now if anyone, it even transitions into work or translates on the work side where if someone hits me up and is like, hey, I got this product, what ammo should I run or this or that, or I'm having problems with X, Y, or Z. I'm like, oh, well, I know a guy who works there. Let me call them and figure it out. Like,
no, I mean,
that's
what it's all about. Yeah. You know what I mean? Making those good connections and I mean, just being a genuine person. You know what I mean? I was taught that way from a young age. Like it's funny to say it, but it's true. It rings true is like treat other people how you would like to be treated.
100%.
And it's true.
And I think it's funny, like, to me, it all keeps wrapping up. People are going to be like, you shut the fuck up. But it's like, it keeps wrapping up to this, like, you grew up in that hardcore scene. It's like,
they're going to go, what's a hardcore scene?
Yeah, exactly.
Like the rave?
Oh, yeah.
Like the rave thing?
I love 5 Finger Death Punch. No, but it's like, I think that kids that grew up in the hardcore scene, I think have no problem being themselves.
Yeah.
Like,
self-expression
being completely genuine.
Is welcomed. Yeah.
Right. Being completely genuine, knowing who you are as a person. And like, there's no one in the world that if I have to go have a conversation with them, that is going to intimidate me by like,
no way. Yeah.
I don't give a fuck.
I can go talk to anybody.
Right.
And that's a skill that, you know, kids I say this, I feel old saying it, kids these days.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like, I mean, these people, they don't have that, you know, they grew up in an iPad, iPod, you know, generation right in their face all the time. And those interpersonal social skills are kind of lost.
Yeah.
It's really sad to see because, I mean, I grew up in the 90s, and we didn't have that. I didn't have the internet until 2000 something. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, you had to put yourself out there. You had to talk to people, whether they're young, old, in between.
It is such a weird, like, I'm not even 30 and I'm 29 and you're not that far into your 30s.
Yeah.
It is so weird to have that old head mentality of like,
well, back in my day, we counted change back.
Yeah. Like, I remember being 13, 14, going to shows at a vet center or whatever and seeing grown men harming one another.
Yeah. And you're like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I want to do this again.
I belong here.
Yeah.
It's like, so weird. And when people not, you know, don't know anything about the hardcore scene, listen to this podcast, are going to go,
yeah, you're fucking idiot.
What's wrong with these people?
Oh, tough guys.
But it's like, I mean, it definitely was an interesting place to grow up, interesting time to grow up.
And it's so to look at it from the outside. And I understand it for people who look at it on the outside and they're like, you're just listening to this angry yelling music.
Yeah,
and
but there's like, so much more.
But it's like, why don't you just I'll print out, like, even my girlfriend's the same way. She's like, why do you listen? Like, how do you listen to this angry stuff? I'm like, yeah, but look at because she thinks like, I won't put her on blast. There's a bunch of people that think like, whether it be like pop or whatever, like, well, at least their lyrics mean something. I'm like, oh, really?
Like,
go listen to Firestorm.
Just because you don't know what they're saying, can't understand it, doesn't mean it doesn't mean something. Yeah.
Like they're talking about standing up for what you believe in, like treating others the way they should be treated.
And you know, whether or not you believe what those lyrics are about, it's like there's mad respect for people who put themselves out there to stand up for what they believe in.
100%.
And that's one of the things we do stand for at Guerrilla Tactical.
Yeah.
We want to give you the tools for success, but we also want to applaud people who, you know, do what 100%. They feel is doing what's right.
And equally, you should be just as willing to call people out for being kooks.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that this younger generation of the gun industry, I think you see it. Even from like the an FFL, like a dealer, like you see it all the way through. And I think people have no problem being like, no, that shit's not cool.
That doesn't fly.
It was cool when you were whatever, all you old heads when you were 20, but it's not cool anymore.
Yeah. No, and it's good. It's good to see that shift.
Yeah,
for sure. And like I said it to you earlier today, it's like the gun industry or whatever you want to call it is this massive machine, right?
Yes.
And we're only in this very small niche part of it, but existing in this niche part of it is really the only place that I'd want to exist in as a company. And there's so much room for growth and innovation in this part, which is super cool to see.
Yeah.
Because there's so much out there, all the fuddy stuff and everything of yesteryear. And it's just like, I have no interest. I have no interest in being adjacent to these people.
No, I said it to you before. Like, I think we agree. We both believe the same thing where it's like, I think if you're allowed to own a gun, like I think you should own a gun. I think you should carry a gun.
Yeah.
Like you should have it on you. But just because you're a gun guy does not mean you and I are going to get along.
Sure.
Like it's your analogy of like, we all work in the same building. We're all striving for the same end goal, but that doesn't mean we're at each other's houses at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like
you don't hang out with all your coworkers. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I mean, some people are unable to separate that, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just real life. And to me, that's common sense.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody.
No.
But I mean, we grew up, another thing is like, I grew up rurally and we live rurally now. And like, there are people around us from the town closest to us to up all around us and even further up into the hills with a myriad of beliefs. You know what I mean? And Absolutely. That's just life, right?
Yeah.
And you know, during election time, you'll drive up one road and it'll be all signs for one person, and drive down another adjacent road, it'll be all signs for the other person. And that's fine and good and how it is or whatever. But when push comes to shove, it's a community. Like your immediate people are a community. Yeah. And like when a big snowstorm comes through, no one gets together and says, oh, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? It's, hey, we need to clear the road. I have a tractor. I have a plow. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, you need fuel. I have it, whatever. Yeah. Everyone's happy to jump in. And that's really cool to see, because at the end of the day, people are trying to get home to their families.
Right.
And we just want to promote, you should be a good person, be genuine, 100%. Be a good person. And that's your community.
Tight.
So build your community up, and you're stronger for it.
Yeah. Hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
I guess for the last little bit, couple questions.
Yeah.
It's a ideal day. What do you carry? What's your everyday carry on your
for everything or gun wise?
Everything.
So my everyday carry right now has been, and I don't do this whole thing where I change guns with the season, and coats and all like.
Yeah.
No, I carry a Glock 45 with Acro P2 on there. I got the FD one when it was like really hard to find, and everyone was super bummed about it.
Yeah,
that's why I had it, and I came to really like the optic.
Yeah,
so I've left it on, even though it doesn't go with anything else.
Yeah,
just FD microwave sitting on top of my. So I carry Glock 45. I used to be a 19 guy all the time, but I have pretty big hands, so
couple extra rounds doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, that's great. And then just having that 17 grip really helps a lot.
Yep.
For purchase on the weapon. I carry one of our side-by-side holsters.
Yep.
I have a TLR7A on the gun. Definitely a big proponent of weapon lights.
Yeah,
should always have them. Have a good one. Don't buy some crap on Amazon that was just because it was $50.
But it's a light and a laser.
Also, yeah, green or red.
Yeah.
It doesn't. No holster companies make holsters for them, so don't email us and ask because they suck.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean that's my gun. My gun setup is pretty stock. Otherwise, yeah, side by side.
You carry the
holster.
tourniquet.
I carry my ETQ tourniquet with our Expedient carry system every single day.
Yep.
Everywhere. I mean, if nothing else, that goes in my pockets. It's right by the door. I leave the house, it goes in there. And also our KISS med pack.
Yep.
Down my right thigh, concealed medical supplies. So I feel pretty set up when I leave the house with that stuff, and I think it's easy to remember.
Are you a knife guy? You made knives. Are you a knife guy?
Yeah. I carry like a folder usually.
Yeah.
Kershaw or something like that, just to have something.
Yeah, open boxes.
Maybe not so much of a defensive tool, but
no, yeah.
But I do like black triangle stuff.
Black triangle.
When they're
the coolest dude too.
Yeah, he is a super cool dude.
Dude.
Super cool dude. And he's a big jiu-jitsu guy too. So that's a plus for me.
Have you been to his spot in Hampshire Beach?
I haven't been down there.
Cool.
We've met and talked a bunch and everything. We actually talking about doing some collaborations later this year.
Yeah.
I'd love to go down and see what he's got going on, but I don't make it back to the East Coast that much anymore.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about it. We got to run it by the big guy, but it'd be cool to do. I think it's important. I think that we have that same mentality of like, if you're going to carry a gun or even if it's not a defensive gun, whether it's like you're going to go to the range and you're going to shoot. I mean, someone's most likely to get shot at a range than just walking around.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's important to I would like to offer, because we have no medical stuff on our website and like that. And I don't think it's something that we need to start stocking, but I think it would be cool to offer the consumer a package where if they buy the gun, they can also buy this bag. It's a bag, it's a whatever, whether it be a range bag or whatever. And it also comes with a basic, whether it be the KISS or just a basic med kit with them. And it's all encompassed. They don't have to worry about sourcing individual parts, whatever. It just comes in.
No, I mean, that's the other thing too that we find is with getting so many customer service emails and whatnot is like making it as super easy as possible, as most digestible information as possible for a consumer. And I'm sure you know this. Then they don't have to weed through so much to get the knowledge that they need. And it's kind of goes the same way with products. Like, if they come to us and we could say, oh, you have nothing. Well, here's the holster you need. Here's a light that we offer. Here's an optic. You can do it all. The only thing we don't sell is the gun. Then you can get it all together. Here's a discount code. We'll hook you up, and you can get it all at one place. It makes it much easier. So that kind of stuff is a great idea. It's like the range setup or whatever.
Yeah. That's something we'll have to kind of toss around. Maybe if consumers see this, they can, like guys that watch, they can kind of chime in on it. But I think it would be cool to link up with you guys or whoever and just try to come up with a run of, here's everything you need, just buy it and go to the range.
Yeah. I mean, any involvement we can have with other companies trying to promote a similar message in the sense of getting people more prepared or ready for, the worst day happens at the range. Like, I want to hear that you're ready and had a tourniquet. And your friend didn't die.
Even these guys, a lot of our consumers are hunters, and a lot of them are like backwoods hunters and stuff like that. The fix is a 5-pound gun. Guys will go sheep hunt with it, do whatever. If they have that, I know in my range bag I have that med kit that came with it, I should throw that in my backpack. Like there's a guy, his name's Will. He's a big Q guy. He has a crazy story about a bear hunt and getting knocked out, and he got injured on this bear hunt, and that's a reality too. Like if you're out in the woods, you're by yourself, you're hunting. Like take the med kit with you, throw in your backpack. Like if that's something that we can help with too, that's cool to me. I think we'll have to talk more about that for sure and get the big guy involved in it. And
I got a crazy story about the Gambia if you want to hear about it. It's not about bear hunting or hunting in general, but it is about dangerous animals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we were off the coast of Gambia for the first time, and all of their like admiralty charts for the area, that's like the plotted paper charts of the whole area, are like 50 years out of date.
Perfect.
Because like no one's going through. And so we were supposed to take 2 of the small ribs in to pick up soldiers on like a secluded dock, hidden away from everyone, because it's the kind of thing that if you alert the country that you're there before, and like just very specific people get to know, then everybody knows. Right. It's like just everyone tells.
Yeah.
Kind of messes up some of the plans. So we took 2 of the ribs in, and there was like this small gap in, there was like a sandbar about 1.5 miles off, and the tides were going up. So we were like, okay, it's cool. Yeah, we're fine. We have depth sounders on the boats, and we're like, okay, we have to follow this. And then according to this chart, there's going to be this one swath that's like, 10 feet deep or whatever through the sand. So we're like, okay, cool. We'll hit that. So we get out there, and halfway through, we're like, this is not correct. Yeah. So we're trying to like slowly kind of, troll through and no, it wasn't happening. Before I knew it, one of our bigger boats getting blown onto the sandbar with waves are breaking over it, putting us on the sand. So immediately trimmed the engines up, kind of checking out the whole situation, and it's not good. We're definitely grounded. And these boats are like heavy. Yeah, you know what I mean? Small, like they're not small. It was just 2 of us, two people in each team, because we had to kind of reserve space for all the soldiers coming back to the ship. And so we're like, we're going to miss our checkpoint with these guys and check in, but what are we going to do? Like, we got to get this boat out. So we were able to get out, spawn the boat. We're up to like chest, waist, a little over waist deep, up to our chest of water, and the tide's slowly coming in, so we have that to our advantage. So we trim the boat, engines up, spin the boat, bow into the waves. Every time a wave breaks on the sandbar, it lifts the boat off the sand, right? So my buddy and I are in the water, and as soon as that happens, we push as hard as we can. Everything we have moves an inch, comes up over and over, repeat it. And finally, we get the boat free of the sand after probably 30 minutes of pushing as hard as we can. We're exhausted. We jump back in, trim them down. And then we get back out into deeper water, and we're like, well, we're not going to be able to pick up these guys. So we call on the sat phone to these guys. And there's one of our coordinators is on land with them already, flew into the country. So we'd call him, and he brings like a local guy out on a little boat, a little skiff, a couple of the soldiers out to like meet us and guide us through the sandbar. So we do this. Great to see him. Whole thing takes, I don't know, a couple hours, to get through this all. And so we get dockside, we're loading everybody up, and then a couple of soldiers come over, and their commanding officer's like, well, what took you so long? And we're like, oh, well, this happened, and we washed up on the sandbar, and we had to push ourselves out. And everything goes, oh, how'd you get out? I said, oh, we pushed the boat out. And he's like, what do you mean you pushed the boat out? And I was like, well, we jumped out. And he's like, he's rubbing his face like this. Oh, no. I'm like, what's wrong, dude? He's like, there's crocodiles all around here. There's crocodiles. And then they come through the estuaries, and they go a couple miles out, and they go on the sandbars, and they're all around. And he goes, you guys were in the water? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, do not go in the water.
Dude, of all the animals too. No way.
I've seen some big crocs in Africa up in the river systems in like Gabon, and like taking prey and doing their death roll. And when he said that, we were like, tight.
That's the one thing.
But now we have this hilarious story to tell because we lived.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's funny. Like tell it on podcasts and stuff, and it's fun. But at the time we got back to the boat, and we were like, well, that's surreal. Yeah. He's like, don't go in the water.
Yeah. I won't, dude. Yeah. I already did. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. One time.
That's crazy. Damn. No, that's wild.
It would have been wilder if like we fought a crocodile, but that's not what
you saw them coming.
We jumped in the boat, and then the last minute it was like Jumanji.
Yeah. Still though, that's tight.
The idea, maybe it's even scarier, the idea that they're around, just lurking.
They were probably watching you, dude. Yeah. That's insane.
So, it's pretty funny.
Damn.
Did a lot of wild stuff.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I guess last question for those who, because we've talked about it a bunch, and there's probably a lot of people that don't know anything about it and may want to get into it. If you had to tell a kid, I'll give you 3 records to listen to get into hardcore.
Ooh.
What would they be? And is Marauder on there?
Marauder is not on there.
That's
in
fine.
My mind.
That's
in my mind,
mine either.
It's not on there.
Mine either.
I would say Trial, Are These Our Lives would be a big one for me.
Okay.
It's like,
that's not what I expected.
yeah. I mean, we grew up in going to Syracuse shows. So
Right.
Earth Crisis, Destroy the Machines was a big one growing up in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then I guess like another Syracuse band, like Another Victim or The Promise would be.
Oh, The Promise
would be a big one for me.
Cool.
Believer is one of the. I actually have lyrics tattooed on my chest from Believer. So yeah, that's I mean, some pretty angry yet positive stuff that kind of shaped my worldview growing up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. We talked about it all the time. Like I tell people all the time. There's my first day at SIG. I was working with a bunch of guys, whatever, and a guy was just getting to know me. A guy was asking, "Oh, what kind of music do you listen to?" I was like, I mean, you know just as well as I do. Oh, I like heavy stuff. Like I listen to heavy stuff. Like you for sure haven't heard of it. So I'm just like,
right.
And not because we're cooler. It's just like you don't listen to it. It's shitty, so you don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
sound like it was recorded in the basement.
Yeah. I'm like, I listen to like a lot of heavy stuff or whatever. But I'll listen to whatever. And he was like, oh, heavy stuff. He's like, I know a little something about heavy stuff. And he fucking rolls his t-shirt up. And he's got this massive Slipknot S just on the side. Which and now I'm like, that's tough as
like,
fuck.
That's sick. Yeah.
But at the time I was like, not that
like,
kind of heavy
nerd.
stuff. Yeah, I was like, not that kind of heavy stuff, whatever. But now I'm like, that's tough.
Yeah.
Dude. Like that's super cool. But yeah, no, people it's funny. So Colin, our marketing manager, like I grew up in hardcore, like our buddy Tommy, who is one of the people who listen to this are familiar with Thomas. He was in like a heavy band growing up too. Like that's just whatever.
There's so much crossover that we're finding out.
Oh yeah.
As it comes out more and more, like someone sees me on YouTube, sees the tattoos or whatever, and they're like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah. I saw you in that DVD and bought. No,
yeah. Right. It was called a Boston Beatdown.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the crossover as you know, you see it. It happens all the time.
Absolutely.
There's so many like old hardcore dudes who are either in the industry or big shooters or whatever. And it's just really cool to see.
It's cool. I'm personally am a fan of some gatekeeping, but but it is very cool to see people getting into hardcore and really like whether people are pissed off about it, but like Turnstile made like hardcore accessible for people like recently. Yeah. When you have people like Demi Lovato being like, the Turnstile record's my favorite record. Or
you're like, what?
Yeah. And so like now Colin, our marketing director, the director of marketing, he said it to me today. He's like, dude, I'm like really into like hardcore's cool. I'm like, yeah, it is cool, dude, isn't it? Like imagine when you were 15 and pissed off at everything and like that's all you were.
That's the thing, you know, as I get older, it's like we still jam it in the shop. Like, you know, my operations guy is an old hardcore kid as well, like much older than me even. And we still jam it, you know what I mean? And we have, you know, people are into it there. Yeah. But like, I feel like the old guy was like, I like to listen to folk music more than, you know what I mean? Listen to acoustic stuff, you know? And I'm just like, you know, as time goes on, like I don't have the same angst that I did years ago, thankfully, because I'd probably like have done some terrible thing or something like that, you know what I mean? And
it's cool to go back and listen. Yeah. Like every now and again I'll drive, like I listened to like Killing with a Smile all the way through recently. And it was like, it kind of holds up.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, and I always said it even back then, is like, and you know, other bands have been, you know, quoted saying it and whatever, but I was always of the belief that, you know, you get in there, those four walls, you're taking what you learn in those four walls and applying it to the real world. Yeah. And like, I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today without that upbringing. Yeah. But I'm not completely immersed in the scene.
There are definitely some guys that still are.
Absolutely there are. Yeah. And I'm not knocking it if that's your thing. That's your thing. But I'm glad to have broken that mold. And
it is funny
didn't become a tattooer or a barber or something and did a lot of other, you know, what I consider a little bit better, cooler things with my life.
It is funny to see that kind of progression and transition into other things. Like, I mean, between me, Tommy, and the other dude, like we're in a band together that Kevin plays all the time, whatever. But like everyone in the band, we all know each other. Some of us went to high school together, but we all know each other from playing in bands on shows together, like heavy bands, whether it be metalcore or hardcore or whatever. And so we get together and we're like, all right, what do we start playing music, and it comes out this like acoustic, electric, fucking chick, whatever. Not heavy.
Yeah, you're like, all right, I guess this is what we're doing. This is awesome.
Yeah. Why do we sound like girls? Like, but whatever, it's cool. And yeah, but it's funny, like song structure wise, we don't know how to write like a pop song. We'd write like verse, fucking build up, breakdown,
Right.
song's over. Like it's weird, but
It's weird. It's almost like you played in heavy band.
yeah, exactly.
before.
We don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah.
But
No, it's cool.
yeah, right on. Well, firstly, thank you for coming out here, and it's literally the opposite end of the globe
Yeah.
for you.
No, I mean, it's, I mean, I have a lot of roots in the East Coast, and
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
a cool reason to come back. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you inviting me out and, give me a platform and have me on.
Yeah, 100%. Built up a gun earlier, and
No, we're looking forward to
go to the range
shooting
tomorrow.
that fix.
Yeah, go to the range tomorrow and shoot a bunch of Kevin's steel.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Use Kevin's ammo and shoot his steel, and
Sounds great.
tell him when he gets back.
Yeah.
Perfect. Right on. So yeah, anyone that wants to find you,
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is the big one.
Yeah.
That's where we do most of our stuff. Guerrilla, GUERRILLA_tactical.
yeah, 2 R's, because there's
Two
there's a
Rs
single R Guerrilla Tactical
and 2 L's. Yeah.
and the underscore.
Yeah, and the underscore does it.
We'll link it.
Yeah, and that's the main page. We have YouTube all linked in a link tree there, website. Yeah, that's the spelling of Guerrilla is very important.
Yes.
Because a lot of people mess it up.
Yeah.
2 R's.
Yeah,
2
I've
L's.
spelled it with 1 R before, and I'm like, nope, not that kid.
Not
There's
that
some,
one,
There's
yeah.
some kid with like 13 followers. That,
Dude, I tried to hit up like a couple when we first started the account, because
Yeah.
like we grew the account pretty quickly.
yeah, absolutely.
And we hit up a couple of the owners of the original accounts that haven't been used in like 5 years.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, can we get your like Guerrilla Tactical, like Guerrilla account? No response. I'm like, dude, you have 25 followers.
Yeah.
Like they're just inactive, and it's
Yeah.
just forever that way. And it's whatever. Like people know where to find us.
Yeah.
Of course, Instagram is
Yeah.
coming for every gun company hard. And
Do you get hit super bad with it being adjacent, not necessarily directly?
yeah, so we get hit pretty bad.
Yeah.
We get hit with shadow banning or whatever you want to call it, or it's been probably 2 years since they've said that they could recommend any of our content.
That's crazy.
And we dabble with advertising and whatnot as well. We have to, I think everybody has to in this space at this point, especially being election year. I feel like they hit it even harder during times like these, and just coming for us, and it's crazy, but we're hanging in there, and we have a backup account too in case. And
Tight.
the biggest thing I always tell people is like, sign up for the mailing list,
100%.
because it's the only thing that any company really controls.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, they can't tell you what to put on there, what not to put on there. And yeah, I think incentivizing that is also super important, just to get people on there.
Absolutely.
And
we're working with a company out of kind of our region that does that a lot, and we're working on some new campaigns that really make it worthwhile for you to be a part of our mailing list. Is something we're excited about. I'm like, I don't know a lot about, like, I really don't like social media that much. For somebody who doesn't like it a lot, I have to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
And it's just the nature of the beast. And it's an necessary evil in this day and age. Everyone's on socials, right? And so we're working with a company that, it's not a marketing company, but they can help us out with the email stuff, because we need to build our list up, because someday Instagram is going to go away, and all these companies are going to go, what do I do? What do I do? And for a company like Instagram to have, or Meta or whatever, to have such power over our brands and stuff is super disheartening.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, keep it up. Join the mailing list and make it worth your while.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully in the future we can figure out a project, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
That all encompassing everything you need.
Yeah, we'll have to get you out to Washington too, and do some cool content, and shoot some guns out and clear cuts.
Bring all our space guns and show you Washington boys how to shoot.
That's right. Sounds good.
Right on. Well, thank you. And
thank you.
Yeah, we'll hit the range tomorrow.
All right, looking forward to it.
Right on.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
Take care.